Hey guys, what's up? Unrested back. It's with a heavy heart that I'm making this video as it's my last week in Japan and I leave tomorrow. It's been rough to have to prepare to leave back for America. I miss my house in America, of course, but I miss my family here in Japan way more. But you don't want to hear about the sappy stuff. You want me to get into the video, and that's what I'm here to do today. Members, I'm sorry I missed one of your members' videos last week. I promised to give you two this week. The only reason I missed that is just because I'm trying to fit in as much family time as possible. I don't have any other excuse other than that. I want to talk today about a really interesting conversation I had about the future of Japan and why it's been failing economically over the last few years, especially post-COVID. And just after it's ramped up since 2020, it's kind of really been going downhill economically. It's one of the main reasons I had to make a move back to America, that just financial stability of living a life as a gaijin in Japan is nearly impossible at this point, unless you have a job like what my friend does, where he is working with an American salary in Japan under the branch of a Japanese subsidiary that's connected to his corporation that he belongs to, trying to get them to become a more broader horizon, a bigger grip, and a larger clientele for the Japanese branch that is obviously in Japan, being run by the Japanese. He's having a lot of trouble seeing his company expand here. He's not the main CEO or anything like that, but he's pretty high up there. And this is the conversation I had with him and his worries for the future that he saw. I'm not going to obviously name the corporation. I'm not going to tell you exactly what his job is. And I'm not going to tell you what industry they're even in. But let's just say it's a way to digitally market things in Japan. That's the best description I can give, where you somewhat understand what's going on, but I'm still vague enough that you'll never be able to search this person up, as I'm sure he wants to stay anonymous. And pretty much it's him going in there and previewing, explaining, teaching, and educating the Japanese staff on new ways that they can reach clientele in the year 2024. Obviously, technology keeps changing. We've moved into digital platforms on every level possible, but there's still, as I've said in the past, a lot of archaic things going on with technology in Japan. And here's a lot of the problems that he's running into. It was really a super interesting conversation because he came to me asking for advice, which I felt like I'm not a corporate type person. I don't know what I could tell you, but he said, well, you've lived in Japan longer than I ever have, and you've worked with Japanese people longer than I ever have, and what should I do with these situations? And I gave the best feedback I could. I don't know how helpful I am to him. I'm merely a teacher who, I worked with Japanese on a teaching level, but not really expanding into a corporate level. I will say one thing I always notice this with every school I ever taught at. Their actual online presence was pathetic. Their websites would be looking like 1990s GeoCities Angel Fire websites that were just a mess of HTML that had not been corrected since the internet first started back in the early 90s. And I mean, it was such a mess that if you tried to read it on a phone or you tried to even read it on a normal computer with a browser other than Internet Explorer, it would just be like a mash of text layered over text. By that, I mean like they hadn't even gotten the markup correct. Like it would just be literally layered over top of each other where you couldn't read this jumble. The buttons wouldn't work. The rollovers wouldn't work. The pictures would be from teachers who hadn't worked there in like a decade. It was all really weird stuff. Like I'd just be like, why does our website look like it's, a jumbled GeoCities mess made by a 15-year-old in the early 90s. This is pathetic. There'd be like spinning JPEGs and stuff like that, and spinning GIFs and stuff like that. It was really a goofy mess, and they were still like that even when I left Japan. They wouldn't even understand the fact that when you put a website on a phone, it has to be totally different. You need to probably use WordPress if you totally don't know what you're doing. And this just were like, just very basic concepts of marketing that even schools were not able to do. Even most of the schools I worked at were international, and they were so set in their ways that they would refuse to let the English staff properly translate their marketing to international students, who they would try to, of course, garner international students. There were like mixed couples and stuff like that, and gaijin who did visit Japan who needed to enroll their kid in a school, and they wanted to be in an international school, and they wouldn't fix the English on their website for that. And it would be like, why would you think you would be marketable to someone coming to Japan internationally and you saying you are like a premier English teaching international bilingual school, but you can't even get the English right on your main website? That's not a good look. I don't need to look at it and correct it, but please get somebody from some company that makes your website that speaks fluent English correct this marketing and all the words on your website. This is ridiculous. And this is kind of the same thing he's running into with his own, I guess, push to correct the very, I don't know if I want to say laid back or lazy approach to expanding their company within Japan. He said, here's the biggest problems. Number one, as soon as he got in there, he noticed right away there's no people under 50 at any of these jobs that he's trying to teach people what to do to change the way of their marketing and their digital marketplace and what the vision of their company is online. And he said when he asked around to find out why, he realized that Japan is still keeping these 12-hour shifts and that the younger generation just refuses to work these, which I've talked about before. They saw their dad work these jobs where they're there for 12 hours a day. And he said the crazy thing is I still go home after 8 hours. He said, I don't know why they are staying there for 12 hours. He said, I'm on an American schedule. I get paid as an American. Some of our salaries are the same. I go home after 8 hours because I'm on an American schedule. My boss is not there. I'm not going to wait for him to go home before I go home like these guys do. And he said, they don't even really have a boss there. If anything, I'm their boss. And he said, I go home after 8 hours, but the other person below me who's a little higher up than the rest of them stays for 12 hours and they don't want to go home before that guy goes home. So it's all this like, I'm not going to go home if you're not going to go home. And if you're not going to go home, I'm not going to go home. Everybody looking at each other for the key, the cue, the go signal to leave for the day. He said it's just ridiculous. He said he's had to tell them before, like, nothing on your reports, nothing on your status here has shown like an improvement in efficiency for staying over 12 hours. He said, you might as well just call it an 8-hour day and fit everything in then. And they're like, yeah, but if we have an 8-hour day, then we can't have like an hour and a half lunch. And he said, just take a half-hour lunch. He said, why do you need an hour and a half for lunch? And they're like, yeah, but that's like our time to socialize and stuff like that. And he's like, just do that after. He said, you guys go out drinking after you finish work. Why don't you just do it then? And they're like, yeah, but that's just not traditional Japanese way. And he said, maybe it's time to change that. He said, because the traditional Japanese way is not working for this branch of our company here in Japan. He said, the other big problem he's running into is longevity over meritocracy. He said the guys who have been there for decades upon decades, who started when they were 25 and they're now up in their 50s, they've been there for 25 years plus, are considered the hot shots, the big guys, the ones in charge. But he said their actual results have been really quite bad, and that's why he's been sent out there. And that there's younger people in their 40s who are doing better because they somewhat understand the new technology a little bit better. They were raised with some of it. And he said they're the ones with the actual results that he needs. And he's had to promote some of them to higher positions, and it's pissing off the guys who have been there 25 years plus, because they're like, why would my dedication, my long-term dedication to this company be trumped by this guy simply making a bigger sales quota? And he said, because that's how meritocracy works. That's, longevity doesn't mean anything. Longevity doesn't help a business continue on forever. Just because somebody's been with a company for an ultra long time, if they've never changed when the company's technology has had to change, that company will not continue to go on forever and ever. That company will slowly start to crumble and not keep up with the times until it becomes a Blockbuster or a Radio Shack like in America. Things just didn't change. They weren't changing with the times. Blockbuster didn't go to an online renting or streaming service. Hence, they eventually were taken over by Netflix. If you don't evolve, you die like the dinosaurs. That's what happens. And he said that's what's slowly happening with this company. And him trying to beat that fact into them is really getting hard to do. He said he's tried, talking to them one-on-one, and he lived in Japan before this. He was actually military based, so he does have some social modicum of understanding of how you talk to Japanese. You can't just be ferociously blunt or scold them. You have to actually be polite, because Japanese are always polite with each other. They don't use rude language. They don't, curse or scream or lose their mind. If you suddenly get ferociously angry in the business place, everyone's just going to shut you down and be like, okay, this person is a madman. I'm not going to talk to them. So he's tried, the good, bad, good sandwich of saying like, look, I appreciate that you've been with this company for a very long time. I appreciate your dedication long term. One bad thing we are starting to run into here is as things start to change, I notice you're not implementing these new systems. And I think your ability to do that is, more than possible. I think you're a great learner. I can see you easily moving into these, new non-tangible applications that allow you to promote the company in a different way. And if you're willing to do that, I'm willing to teach you. And he said, I've tried to approach it like that. He said, the biggest response he keeps getting is things like, you don't know Japan, or you're not Japanese, so you wouldn't understand Japanese, or you don't speak Japanese, so you don't understand the way the Japanese work. And he's like, you know what? You are right. I haven't lived here a long time. He said, but what I'm going by right now is charts and measurements that show the people who are adapting to these new implemented procedures within our digital marketing are having bigger and better results. And those who are refusing to implement these are slowly crumbling in their departments. And he said, I understand what you mean by that there's a bunch more culturally that I need to learn. And this guy's he's taken the time to take some of his hours outside of the job to enroll in college to learn fluent Japanese on top of, he said, I'm not going to give up on these guys until I've learned the language fluently and I can speak to them on the same level, in the same business level Japanese, and that I've given it 5 years, because he can say to himself at the end, at least I tried everything I could. He said, that's the last thing I can think of that I need to do that will let me touch base with them on an even higher level, that I learn their language perfectly and speak to them in that language. And he said, I understand what they're talking about culturally. I'll never be Japanese. Traditionally, I've never been raised with Japanese traditions. And, as my own race myself, I'll never be Japanese. That's very true. But he said, they need to be able to get past this, that yes, we as Gaijin are never going to be Japanese, but we as Gaijin do now have things like studies, the internet, access to like a worldwide web of everything and anything you could ever want to learn about Japan. It's not 2007 like when I got here and Japan was very fresh to the internet and had not uploaded a lot of stuff. He said, even if there's stuff I can't understand that's written only in Japanese, Google Translate is good enough now that I can access any kind of results that I need to. With anything that is even slightly a rough translation, the English speakers in the departments can translate that for me, because people's, ability to use AI translation is getting better and better to the point that I can find results that show me what's happening with this company. He said, in the past, that's true. I would literally have to know a ton more about Japan before I came here. But now we're living with everyday, moment by moment results that show me what's working and what's not. And not being culturally or traditionally raised in Japan doesn't really have anything to do with these results. And them still using this as a shield in 2024 is hindering some of the people in the top positions that he said, if he can't make this work in 5 years, he's going to have to let them go. And he doesn't want to do that. He said, these are people who've been with the company for a super long time. He wants to work with them to see them have a future and help them implement these to move the company forward into a brighter future and a bigger branch within Japan. But he said there is so much stubbornness for these older long-term employees. And he said, I've seen this in other countries too. I've seen where people have been there a super long time. And he said, but sadly, what happened with those people is they were let go. And he said, I don't want to have to do this here. But like I said, he is willing to learn quite a bit more. He's lived in Japan before. This isn't his first time living here. And now he's even enrolling in business level Japanese to get up on the same level of communication to make sure even those who, it is an international company where most people need to speak English and Japanese to be in there. But he said, I need to be speaking on their level and in their language to make sure they see I'm showing full respect for understanding what they're trying to implement in their own ways of working and stuff like that. And he said, I think maybe then we can finally meet in the middle somewhere and I can convince them that this is the future of what we need to implement with this company for this branch to continue to exist and them to continue to have jobs. Because he said, at the end of 5 years, if nothing has changed, this branch might just be closed. Our company is going to have to pull out of Japan and we're going to have to take it to somewhere like India or Taiwan or Singapore where people are more willing to change and implement new and futuristic technological ideas. And he said that's one big thing I'm seeing everywhere in Japan is this refusal to implement new technology or change with the times. And the first thing he started this whole conversation with was, and in the convention that we had for our company just recently, I showed them that Japan had just fallen below Germany as far as GDP is concerned, and they're now fourth. And he said, and they are currently headed on a slope that will have them in the reins of nearly a third world country in the next 50 years if they continue down this slope. And I do not want to see that for Japan. I also do not want to see that for Japan. I don't want to see Japan in a GDP bracket that has them on the level of a third world country within 50 years. But that's where they're headed to if they don't pull things together and start to change with the times. This is sad to see. It's a sad report to hear, and it's a rough conversation to have with my friend. But I think it's also very realistic and something a lot of Japanese within the corporate sector need to take into consideration if they want to see a future for Japan. And also implement those 8 hours, man. If you want to start to see people have kids, implement those 8 hours so people can see the kids that they have at home. That was the other big thing my friend said. He said, like, of course nobody wants to have kids anymore. If I work 12 hours, I'd never see my daughter. And he said they've got to stick to these to be able to, actually see, have, and produce families. He said, I don't know why they're still trying to push this 12-hour work week. He said, it's insane. I can't believe there's such a push to not change rather than to change for the better of the country's future. Anyway, sorry, a bit of a downer of a report there at the end. Guys, if you'll give me just a little bit of time, I'm going to get membership shout outs in my next video, and I'm going to get 2 member videos out this week. They're both going to be Osoroshi Saturday videos that are going to be some scary stories. I've put together 2 really good ones, and I even have some video stuff for that in my members' videos. So I hope you as members will enjoy those. For the future, please realize this next week, I'm going to be on the move nonstop. I'm flying back. I've got a 16-hour trip. I've got to get re-implemented into my sleep as far as being a 13-hour difference on sleep. So I might not be responding for a while. And I'm going to be kind of down because I'll be missing the heck out of my family. So please bear with me as I make these changes moving into the next week. And I will get back at you again next week. And I hope for this day that you're listening right now, you're having a great rest of the day. Please enjoy the video that I've shown on here. This is a current Matsuri going on down here in Shitenoji. So I hope you enjoy the scenes that I'm showing you from this. Have a great one.